Okay, we're set, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. Call the meeting to order at 7:03 p.m. and start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay. I pledge
Pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, hello everyone. Start off with the regular statement on remote participation, consistent with the Massachusetts Open Meeting Law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, and Regulation 940 CMR 29.10, which allows for remote participation in certain circumstances under the Massachusetts Open Meeting Law regulations. The Mendon-Upton Regional School Committee will be conducting this meeting remotely. In this particular case, all 6 members of the committee are participating remotely and virtually through video conferencing. This is consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 10th, 2020, which eased the requirements of having a meeting in a physical space open to the public and having a quorum of the committee physically present. Any and all votes will be conducted by roll call votes. Per usual, this meeting will also be live streamed and recorded. So first on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. We have a motion to approve tonight's agenda, please.
Motion to approve the agenda for this evening.
Second.
And we vote by roll call. Sean, will
Sean
you start us
Nicholson.
off?
Sean Nicholson, aye.
Lee Martin, aye.
Phil DeZetter, aye.
Carrie Lawrence, aye.
Dorothy Scally, aye.
Vicky Ludwigson, aye. Motion, the agenda is approved. Next up is the approval of the open session minutes of February 8th, 2020.
Motion
Make a
to, go ahead. Dorothy, go ahead.
Motion to approve the open session minutes of February 8th, 2020.
Second.
2021.
Yes, 2021.
Yes, thank you, Lee.
Sorry, 2021, yeah.
Otherwise,
Copy editor too.
And I'll second that.
Vote by roll call.
Sean Nicholson, aye.
Lee Martin, aye.
Phil DeZetter, aye.
Carrie Lawrence, aye.
Dorothy Scally, aye.
Vicky Ludwigson, aye. All right, minutes are approved. Next, can we get a motion to approve the executive session minutes of January 25th, 2021?
Okay, I'll do that one. Motion to approve the executive session minutes of January 25th, 2021.
Second.
And vote by roll call.
Sean Nicholson, aye.
Lee Martin, aye.
Phil DeZetter, aye.
Carrie Lawrence, aye.
Dorothy Scally, aye.
Vicky Ludwigson, aye. So those minutes are approved as well. Next up, we have student comments from Owen.
All right, thank you very much and good evening. I'm hoping everyone had a very good week last week. Over winter break last week, I enjoyed just taking it slow and catching up on some much needed sleep. So off the bat, we want to congratulate the Nipmuc Drama Guild, who exemplified the meaning of The Show Must Go On with their virtual production, previously taped, that premiered Friday, February 12th before winter break. Nipmuc students opened our eyes to what the pandemic has been like for us teenagers with the production of Everything Seems Like Maybe. If you didn't have the chance to watch it, you can stream it on the Mendon-Upton Regional Schools YouTube page. The one thing I can relate to and have missed the most as a teenager during this pandemic is connecting with my friends outside of the classroom. We also wanted to thank the music department and choir director, Miss Simmons, who was able to be creative this year and still deliver the tradition of singing telegrams for Valentine's Day. Although they weren't in person this year, the after-school a cappella groups collaborated on a virtual singing telegram. You can find the short video on the Mendon-Upton music page at www.mendonuptonmusic.org. The next class of the Portrait of a Learner Scholars program will kick off this Wednesday. There were more than 50 students that signed up to be part of the program that provides an opportunity to celebrate the range of talents, curiosities, explorations, and accomplishments of the Nipmuc students. This week's session will run from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. on Wednesday, February 24th. In today's newsletter, Nipmuc rolled out a new initiative called the Nipmuc Staff Shoutouts, where students, parents, and community members can give a shout out to a deserving staff member. Each Friday, staff will receive their shoutouts on a special card in their mailbox, and they will be posted in the Professional Development Center for staff members to see. As usual, thank you very much for having me. It means a lot.
Thanks, Owen.
Thanks, Owen. We're happy to have you here as always.
Thank you.
All right. So next up, we have community comments. So as with our last meeting, if you do have a comment, please raise your hand and we'll bring you in as a panelist. And we just ask that you identify yourself and which community you reside in. Give us another minute. Oh, all right, I see a hand. All right, let's see. How do I do this?
I already did it.
Oh, thank you.
Lindsay.
Sorry, I was on mute. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear
Yes.
you.
Hi. So I was just curious. I'm an elementary parent, and I was wondering, as the months have gone on and we're hearing comments from a Nipmuc student every 2 weeks at this meeting, I'm curious if there is an opportunity to hear from an elementary community person. I don't know if it would be a student or a parent or from NISCO, just to kind of round out the information a little bit.
Certainly an interesting idea. I mean, I think we have a tradition of hearing comments from someone at the high school to present the student perspective. So I think, certainly be an interesting idea to hear student perspectives from the other grades. I don't know if there's any precedent for that.
I think it's something, if I might insert myself a little bit,
Please.
I think it's something that the school committee could certainly consider, but please realize that having a student rep from the high school level as a student rep to the school committee is a statutory requirement in the state of Massachusetts. So it's not so much that we traditionally have a Nipmuc student as a student rep because we prefer Nipmuc students or prefer older students. It's something that's written into statute.
Thank you.
And that absolutely makes sense. I feel like in the state of the world that we're in right now, it might be nice to hear a perspective from other grade levels and other student levels.
Great. And we do often get that perspective through our principals. Like Beth,
Thank you for taking my question.
of course. Beth Devereux has a question. If you can invite her in, please.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Can hear you, Beth.
Okay, good. So I have a couple of questions. One, Dr. M, when is our next slated town hall meeting?
That will be next week, and you will be receiving an email. All parents will be receiving an email from me tomorrow regarding that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yep.
And my next question is regarding, does the school committee and or Dr. M, do you guys have regular conversations with both of the Board of Healths for Mendon and Upton regarding what's going on in terms of our towns for COVID, and also
Yes, the short answer is yes, we do. And I think will like the data that I will be sharing this evening. A pretty extensive look at the COVID data for both of our communities as well as our school.
I hope what I hear tonight is that my second grader will be back full-time in school. That's what I'm hoping for. But thank you.
I'm not seeing any other hands up. So any other comments from the community before we move on? Great. Seeing none. Can we move on to superintendent's comments?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. First and foremost, I am delighted that our two athletic directors, Chris Schmidt from Nipmuc and Scott Glassman from MISCO, are here. As you may or may not know, they recently wrapped up an abbreviated winter season, and now they're proceeding on to an abbreviated fall 2 season. So I've asked Chris and Scott to talk about some of the successes, some of the challenges, things like enrollment and so on of our sports programs in each respective school. So maybe if you start, Chris.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Certainly, good evening, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen very quickly. I just wanted to present a couple of slides tonight, and just to kind of give you guys a snapshot of what we have been working through, not only during the winter season, but now as we enter into what has now become known as fall 2, or really a gap season. In our winter season, we had 87 athletes that spanned boys and girls basketball, boys and girls alpine ski, boys ice hockey through our co-op at Northbridge, as well as we have 3 student athletes on the girls ice hockey co-op through Hopkinton. I would say this was pretty, the number was pretty similar to what we would typically get in a normal year. The only reason it would be less is because we did have some limitations in terms of roster sizes in some of our winter sports, specifically boys and girls basketball, as well as ice hockey. And then there were some limitations to how many skiers we could carry in terms of allowing for practice and whatnot. So I think all in all, our participation numbers were steady to what they would be in a normal year. From a fall 2 perspective, which is today we started fall 2, as I'm sure you were all thinking of fall sports with a foot of snow on the ground. We have 150 registered fall 2 athletes, and that spans over the sports of cheerleading, football, indoor track, girls volleyball, and then of course our unified basketball team. And these numbers, I would certainly say, are up. We're seeing increases in every sport, with the exception of indoor track, and that's because it's sort of it's not really a full indoor track season. It's sort of a preseason outdoor track type of feel to it. And that was to supplement the fact that the indoor track season, which would typically run in a normal winter season, was canceled. So, and I do think that's had a small impact on the numbers, but otherwise our numbers are up in every sport in the fall 2 season, which, you know, fantastic. Just, you know, some of the highlights from the winter, all of our sports completed a full complement of competitions. Every team played at least 10 games, with the exception of, I believe, girls ice hockey may have missed 1 or 2. And then the nature of the sport, alpine ski, only has about 4 or 5 races typically. And I believe they missed 1, which ironically, I think was weather related. Or I should say 1 was weather related and 1 was when we took the brief break at the beginning of January upon returning. I think I have that right, Phil, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Overall, we had minimal interruptions to our season. We did have some individual student interruptions, but in terms of shutting down for an extended period of time, from a programmatic standpoint, we had that brief pause at the beginning of January, but outside of that, our kids were able to participate fully, which was fantastic for them. Throughout the winter season, at least, actually with all of our sports, we were unable to have live streaming, we were unable to have fans in our gymnasium. So we were able to acquire live streaming capability. And actually, if you did not get a chance to look at or see one of our games, this is sort of what the broadcast looked like. This is actually my alma mater, believe it or not, and they have the same streaming capabilities we do. And I think the neat thing is through this program, which is through the National Federation of High School Sports, you can actually watch with your 1 subscription, you can watch games anywhere on the network. So as you can see, here's my alma mater. My brother, who is a wrestling coach in Virginia, I could actually watch his teams compete all on the same subscription. So for a fairly nominal fee, I think parents are able to get a lot from it. Families, are able to watch from all over the country. The number of people that we have watching from different areas, relatives, you name it. And then assuming we continue with this, which I would certainly expect over the course of our contract with them, we will actually see some royalties, which is a nice benefit. And then, of course, all coaches and athletes fully complied with our COVID guidelines and protocols, which were pretty extensive in our gymnasium, with the social distancing and the way our benches were arranged. Our benches were actually at the end line or baseline, versus the sideline, which you would typically see. And that was to be able to provide the appropriate amount of distance on each of the benches. We had to run an expanded scorers table. So there were a lot of things that we needed to do as a staff in order to make our games happen for our kids. And I think our coaches, our game workers did a phenomenal job. Just some of the other precautions that we took place is that none of our teams are practicing together. So in a typical year, you may get varsity and JV practicing together, and this year they are not, which has broadened the length of time we use the gym, but for good reason. Within practices, kids are cohorted when ever possible. So if they're working on individual drills, they're working with those same 3, 4, 5 students every day in those individual drills, but they do ultimately expand beyond that for the team sport purpose. We had our athletic trainer present in the winter at all of our games, which is something we have not done in the past. And that was really to help ensure people were wearing their masks, making sure social distancing was remaining. And I think all in all of our coaches, all the visiting coaches were very cognizant of those things. And then, ultimately too, there were a number of modifications that our sports went through, most of which, if you looked at the sport, it did look like the sport typically did, which was a little bit different than the fall. I do think we learned a lot, but there were still some changes in order to make the sport, quote unquote, more COVID friendly. And then, I did want to talk about some of the challenges that we have in our fall 2 season, beyond just Mother Nature. And she is by far our biggest challenge. We are trying to fit in some regards, round pegs and square holes. I don't know if a football game or practices have ever started in February. So that's, certainly something that is unique. Playing football in the COVID world is also it brings its inherent challenges if you consider the need for masks, but not only that, but wearing it under a helmet and abiding by all of the rules and regulations that are put into place, though not much has changed about the sport. And then ultimately finding playing facilities for football in particular. Our field, I do not project it being usable in terms of hosting games through the beginning of April. So we are reaching out to a couple of local districts for help with that to hopefully get our kids playing on a turf field so they would be able to, sort of host a game. I do, see some of the challenges in some of our other sports, but I will say, having gone through a fall season and a winter season, I think our protocols are such that I think we're all doing a really good job in terms of being able to follow the COVID regulations. So I almost feel like now in the third season, a lot of, I think what maybe made me nervous, certainly at the beginning of the original fall and winter, I feel good about where we are, having gone through it so much. So this fall 2 season will run through April 24th, which is the end of vacation. And then that Monday we'll start up with spring. So it's been a different year. It's been a very positive one, I think, for our athletes. It's been able to provide them some sense of normalcy, but it certainly has looked different. So that's kind of where we're at.
Thank you so much. Scott, can you talk a little bit about the MISCO program?
Well, I can kind of piggyback with Chris with just about everything that he said. The middle schools programs are a lot smaller than the high schools. Our basketball season, we had the regular amount of students participate. We had 15 on the boys and 13 on the girls team. We even had a manager on the boys team that just came to the practices. He didn't go to games, only home games. He kept our book for us. Our fall 2 season, we're up and ready to run. Challenges for our fall 2 season was pretty much scheduling. A lot of middle schools aren't having teams. And that's something that we also ran into the fall season, which is why we couldn't play soccer. There was all the middle schools to play. So, but volleyball, I think we're almost there with a full schedule. All of our seasons, the teams have had a abbreviated but full schedule, 9 to 10 games. I think we missed a game. One school had COVID and we weren't able to make up one of the games. But that was right off the bat. It was the first week. Otherwise, our participation's high. My volleyball numbers are up. I think we have about 25 girls right now to try out. Our numbers will be lower that we normally keep just because of some schools don't have the facilities to house large teams right now. So we'll probably be around 12 players for volleyball. And like Chris said, going through the fall season with cross country, and seeing how that was run and seeing making any mistakes or learning what we could do better for the other seasons. Everything just seems to run smoothly. Parents are very helpful. We were able to get parents into the basketball games by letting them videotape the games through YouTube and also running the scoreboard. So we were able to get a rotation of parents into the gym to actually see their son or daughter play. Otherwise, season has been great. We're looking forward to fall 2 coming up.
Excellent. Thank you. Any questions for either Chris or Scott?
No questions, but thank you for the update.
Okay.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, second piece, you should have in your packet what I shared with you as far as the revised transportation guidelines. These were released the evening of Thursday, February 11th, right before we broke for vacation. This represents a pretty dramatic departure from the transportation guidance that we received before the start of the school year. And essentially, in our case, they are relaxing the restrictions on bus capacities for both elementary and middle and high schools as well. So both at the elementary and the secondary level, there are no capacity limitations or the same physical distancing requirements. The only piece that they have in place is for middle schools and high schools and communities that are coded red, strictly 2 students per bus bench. Keep in mind the caveat around all of this is the fact that windows should be kept open at all times, at least 2 inches, and the fact that all students are strictly masked, and they also continue to have assigned seating on the bus. I also put in the packet the rationale for the change, and it's a pretty brief and concise presentation from the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health that kind of gives the rationale for how important good ventilation is and what it means with regard to student safety. And it actually details a study that was done locally, I believe in Needham, that showed the effectiveness of open bus windows. So I will be alluding to that a little bit later tonight in my presentation and talking about data and talking about increased in-person instruction. But I share that with you so you actually have the actual guidance itself. And last but not least, you also have in your packet the most current year-to-date expenditure report for FY21. Jay, are there any specific line items that you'd like to highlight or discuss?
We seem to be progressing fairly well this year. The 2 areas of concern for me is one, we've some of our sublines you'll notice have already exceeded their budgeted amount. Other ones have not, but it's always, you know, a hit or miss as to whether we're going to have a large number of sub issues, mostly related to maternities, which we don't know about now. Say, for example, we're budgeting now for next year, but we have no idea what's going to happen. The other issue, as always, is snow and ice. I always like to tell you, hey, we're doing really well, but none of that stuff you have in front of you includes the month of February. And we've had quite a bit of snow this month, so I am concerned about where that's headed, but hopefully we budgeted properly and we'll get through it all. Other than that, I think things are progressing the way they should.
Any questions?
Just a quick question from a bus perspective. Maybe I missed it, but when do we expect to see that kind of being implemented?
It went into effective immediately.
Okay. So basically what it says is we can run buses at full capacity now.
Correct. And, you know, I'll talk a little bit more about that, but one of the criticisms amongst many districts, amongst many superintendents, as DESE was promoting more full in-person instruction, one of the concerns was the regulations that had come out that talked about having 1 student per seat. So as I just said, that has been relaxed. And if you look in the actual guidance document, it says effective immediately.
Well, that's good to hear. I just know when we, at the beginning of the year, Jay, when we talked about busing, if we were trying to bus all the students all at once with the guidance they were giving us, it would have been like literally 2 to 3 times the cost.
Exactly, because you'd have numerous runs.
Joe, so even before we potentially bring back more students for in-person instruction, are we going to be sort of reaching out to parents and surveying in terms of if anyone wants to take advantage of that now, because presumably there'll be some sort of gap, like if this is effective immediately, like are we implementing that?
We can implement it. I intend on, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, I intend on getting a survey out to parents tomorrow to ask about some specific questions. Very short, very concise, but one of the questions will be around busing.
Okay, great.
But keep in mind, even bringing back the first graders starting today, we generally were not having a lot of issues with busing, at least in the present hybrid model.
Any other questions from the committee?
How did that go with the first graders coming back today, Joe? Any feedback?
Yeah, it was very positive. I'm going to talk about that in a couple of minutes, but yeah, it was very, very good.
Good.
Sometimes a little difficult to see the smiles underneath masks, but you know, it was good.
The eyes are smiling.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Move on to subcommittee updates. We have an update from the budget subcommittee.
All the updates are from you, Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Just a couple quick things. First and foremost, I apologize to the committee. I should have gotten something out over the weekend, but it looks like we're going to be once again doing a joint presentation to both Mendon-Upton's FinComs on Wednesday. This coming Wednesday at 7:30. It's technically Upton's meeting. I will forward you the link to present the first pass, what we did last school committee meeting, the first pass of the FY22 budget. And the second piece with regard to the FY22 budget, a couple updates, lowering the request a little bit because we got some good news as we anticipated with regard to healthcare insurance, where we locked in at a 0% increase for next year. So realize we had initially in our last meeting had a very modest amount. I believe it was something like a 2% increase budgeted. So that represents at a zero a savings of about $130,000. Secondly, and we had considerable discussion at the budget subcommittee level about this issue, about the replacement of the Wi-Fi hardware, specifically the routers in all 4 buildings. We've got that budgeted down to only $45,000 for the simple reason that we're now including in that budgeted amount the reimbursement through the E-rate, federal E-rate funding. And then last but not least, this is a really, really modest savings of only about $4,000 or $5,000, but we lowered the amount for the leases for the 4 new tractors that we're proposing for each of the buildings based upon investigating lower priced options. So that's where we are. We will continue to look and try to find savings wherever we possibly can. But as we discussed in the last meeting, you know, there's some real significant challenges moving forward.
Thank you. Any questions before we move on? Okay. So we move on to new business.
Okay. I'm going to just do a quick screen share here. And I will present this. So tonight, what I'd like to do is I'd like to share some really, really specific data with regard to where we are within our communities, where we are within the school district, what it means. I think there's been this floodgate of news within the last week or two, particularly with the re-released CDC guidelines on schools. I think that was on Friday, February 12th. I think there's some aspects of it that are confusing. But I kind of want to put all of this together and get your feedback. And I'd like to share my thinking with regard to the steps to bring more kids back for in-person instruction. So kind of what you were talking about, Carrie, just now. Today marked the first day in which we brought back all of our first graders. I had the opportunity to go to both Clough and Memorial. It was terrific to see all of the kids with their teachers. As I said, I saw a lot of happy faces. I think it marks significant progress, but I feel very strongly it's only the beginning of progress. So it's great to see kids. I do have to report, though, that one first grader at Clough thought that I was President Biden. I don't know how to respond to that. I mean, I do think that this job ages you, but I really hope I don't look like I'm 78 years old. But that's another story for another night. So let me start with some good news. You know, this has been a real long haul. I think today marks a national recognition that we've lost 500,000 people in our country, you know, to this pandemic. I know we've been hit hard across our state, and it's touched everybody. I know that we have people who work in our district who've lost parents, who've lost family members to this. So it's been super challenging. I think the good news is, where are we right now? And we're starting to see data within our two communities that mirrors what we're seeing across the Commonwealth and what we're seeing across the nation, okay? As I've said before, I update our COVID dashboard on a nightly basis. I look at these numbers. I look at our town's numbers. We are in touch with our boards of health on a very consistent basis. So the good news is, as you know, that there are every Thursday evening, the Massachusetts Department of Public Health releases their community report for all 351 communities. And for the first time in 14 weeks, so in over 3 months, our communities were not in red or yellow, okay, the highest or the moderate risk. And at present right now, Upton is in gray, as you can see there, which is the lowest risk, and Mendon is in green. So definitely good news. Now, if you look at all of our communities in the state, and for those of you who may not know your Massachusetts geography, I put in a couple arrows there to represent Mendon and Upton. As you can see, we're kind of going in reverse. If you recall, if you followed this where we were in fall, as we kind of were in October moving into November, I can remember we had a period of time where our two towns were in gray and we had this sea of red all around us. And as you can see here, right now, we kind of have a sea of yellow all around us. And I think that's been pretty consistent, that these two communities have weathered the storm fairly well. And I'll show you some data that supports that in a minute. So if you were to track how this virus has progressed within our communities, probably nothing shocking right here, where you can see it started in both towns to go up on the upswing. And this is data, again, from DPH showing what our 14-day case total is. It started actually before Thanksgiving on the upswing. And as we progressed, we definitely saw a post-Thanksgiving surge, definitely saw a post-Christmas surge. And as you can see, you know, there was tough times in the month of January, and we've seen over the last couple of weeks a fairly precipitous drop. We're still not quite at the point of where we were maybe around October, but this data represents all of the months and all of the weeks since we started in-person instruction on October 5th. So at present, according to the latest DPH report, in our two communities, we've got 475 cases, and as you can see, they're pretty much neck and neck as far as the number of cases in each of our communities. How are we doing in our district? This is kind of a summary of, again, since the start of in-person instruction to yesterday, okay, to the 21st of February. We've had a total of 73 cases within our district. That breakdown is 61 students, 12 staff members. Keep in mind, I'm also including, we've had some cases both on the student and the staff side of folks in the standalone remote program. Those are included. We've had 427 student quarantines, and believe it or not, we've had 43 kids that have been in quarantine 2 or more times. There's actually, I think, about 10 kids that have been in quarantine 3 times. 64 students in quarantine. I'm sorry, 64 staff members have been in quarantine. So I think this bottom row of numbers is really, really significant because it kind of speaks to our schools being safe based upon the precautions that we've put in place. So we have tracked through contact tracing. And once again, I really want to give Leslie McGinnis and our school nurses team a ton of credit. They've been remarkable in the work that they've done. Countless hours communicating with kids, but also communicating with families and really tracking this data very, very meticulously. But we've had, from the contact tracing, 2 cases in total. And I would actually put an asterisk next to that too, that we've contact traced to be from in-school transmission. And without getting into a long drawn out situation, not too long before, 2 or 3 weeks before the February break, we had a situation of 2 students in a self-contained program. And it turned out the 2 students, yes, there probably was transmission with another student, but those 2 identified cases were also siblings. So I think we could also have a chat about, you know, was the transmission occur in the home? Did it occur in the school, and so on? But we have contact traced 2 out of the 61 cases. 0 of the 12 staff cases were a result of in-school transmission. They were cases that happened outside of the school. And kind of this next group of data is also interesting. Of the 427, 139 quarantines were because of in-school contact. So I think that comes out to be roughly 1/3. So if you think about it, there's really 3 reasons why anyone goes into quarantine. It could be in-school contact, it could be out-of-school contact, or it could be travel, okay? So 1/3 of that 427, and that's, you know, quite frankly, that's a big number, but only 1/3 was because of something that happens in school. With our staff, it's a little bit more, and I think that speaks to staff. You know, you're in the ballpark of 55 to 60% of our quarantines was because of in-school contact. But I think our staff has been very, very vigilant about following all of the safety strategies. So again, this is also here, I just broke down all of the numbers that you can see by each of our schools. And then there's also some district staff. The green columns represent student statistics. The gray represent staff statistics. pretty much it falls in line proportionally with the data, with our enrollment data. You would expect there to be, more cases at the high school and the middle school because that's where our enrollment is. And you would expect a little bit less at the elementary level, and that is indeed the case. If you look at the same curve as far as the
Can I ask, Joe, quick question. Can you go back to the last?
Absolutely.
The last 2 slides. So
this one?
What? Yeah. When you say quarantines due to travel, what is that?
So, so that's a great question. So I just, right before this meeting, I updated our COVID dashboard. And right now, district-wide, we have 30 students in quarantine. I can tell you this, Phil, 27 of the 30 are in quarantine because they went away for February vacation. So those student quarantines due to travel were quarantines because they traveled for the holidays or they went away on Thanksgiving and so on.
Oh, okay, so when you say due to travel, so we've had no staff travel.
As you can see, there's two there, and those 2 were due to a bereavement leave and also a family crisis.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So if you go back one more slide where we have the 2 student cases due to in-school transmission.
Yes.
Just so I understand, like those were siblings? Those were.
So picture a program where students are in relatively close proximity and one student is found to be COVID positive. And then the next day, a student that he was near also is COVID positive. Through the contact tracing, it's determined that there's one case due to in-school transmission. And then the day later, that second student's sibling, who's also in the program, also becomes COVID positive. That's the in-school transmission.
So it's just linked to the school is what you're saying?
Yeah, that through the contact tracing, if we were to find that, say, for instance, your son is COVID positive, and then we do the contact tracing and we find out in the last 48 hours, where were all the places that he was, and, and so on. And what our nursing team, along with our administration, along with our town boards of health, in every single one of these 61 student cases, they've done the contact tracing to find out where did it come from. And, it varies. A lot of times it goes through the entire house. Sometimes we've had outside activities that have led to, for example, travel hockey that have led to positive cases or quarantining and so on.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So again, as you can see, and this is probably hardly a surprise, the curve within the district very much mirrors the curve within our communities because, quite frankly, our school district is obviously a microcosm of our 2 communities. So when it spiked post holidays and in the month of January within our communities, we also saw the spike within the district. So as I said before, we have a total to date 73 cases in the district. And I will make the case that is not a horrible number. I mean, I'm not doing the happy dance about 73, but I want to share with you just really briefly, the COVID dashboards for a couple other districts to give you perspective. Okay. So here is one community, Hanover, and I chose Hanover. I'm going to talk a little bit about them coming up. But Hanover is a school district just a little bit bigger than us. They're about 2,500 students. They're on the South Shore. As you can see to date, they've had 244 cases within their 4 schools, just like us, right? Middle school, high school, 2 elementary schools. And within the community, 1,100 cases. I'll share something a little bit closer to home, Blackstone Millville. And Blackstone Millville is smaller than us. They're about 1,700 students, K through 12, and they have almost the same amount of cases that we have. So I bring that up to, again, make the point that I think, relatively speaking, our communities in our school district have done well. So let me talk a little bit about the CDC guidelines that were released a week ago, Friday on the 12th. And I think if you follow this in the media, it's a little confusing, and there's a different emphases that are stressed in the media, but some of the feedback has not necessarily been positive. And there's aspects of the guidelines that I think are, quite frankly, confusing. You know, I just grabbed 3 headlines: CNN, The Hill, and also the Washington Post. And I think, depending on your perspective and where you live, there's different perspectives. You know, part of the conversation on a national level is around some urban districts that have never, ever opened and have been in remote through this whole crisis. And is the CDC telling them, hey, you need to go to hybrid? I know most districts across the Commonwealth are exactly in the same boat as we are, and they're thinking about what are the tangible ways that we can do. We've been in hybrid since almost the start of the year. How do we bring more kids back, and what does that guidance look like? So the CDC guidance, there's definitely aspects here that there's nothing new here. And I want to talk about a couple of these, but it really, again, focuses on 5 key mitigation strategies. First and foremost, and probably the most important, universal and correct wearing of masks. The physical distancing, washing and sanitization of hands, cleaning facilities, and improving ventilation. I think that's real key, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the work that's done there. And then, obviously, the work that, again, our nursing team and our admin staff have worked so hard on, as far as the contact tracing, isolation, and quarantining. Interestingly enough, and I think this has gotten a lot of headlines too, that the CDC was explicit in saying that, you know, you don't have to wait until everybody's vaccinated to come back, or you don't necessarily have to implement a testing program for all kids to come back. They kind of refer to them as strategies that give this additional layer of prevention. So I just want to talk about, again, some of the pieces around the mitigation strategies that we talked a little bit about as we were entering the hybrid model, that I really can't stress enough to all of you that I think are reasons for our success. I think the cleaning of the facilities is real key. Again, I think sometimes it drives some of us a little bit nuts smelling, particularly in the morning, the bio-esque ionization spray that's used to disinfect all of our classrooms, all of our offices. As you can see, our custodian wearing in the picture on the right. That's done on a nightly basis, not just during the deep cleaning day of Wednesday. It's done on a nightly basis. And then also, again, hats off to our custodial staff. They are fastidious in their work in constantly cleaning all of the high touch areas, such as doorknobs, such as the stairwells, all of those pieces are going on an ongoing basis. Something else that I don't think, at least at the school committee level, we've talked about a lot. I think it might have been mentioned, but Jay was terrific in working with the Department of Education right before the holidays in obtaining over 300 of these HEPA air purifiers that are now installed in all of our classrooms. And keep in mind, it's an ionization air purifier that constantly is running during the course of the school day, but really significantly, it's spec'd out so that in an average size classroom, about 800 to 850 square feet, it does another air exchange twice per hour. So that's really, really significant. And we're finding in the air quality testing that we're doing, and we did it, we're doing it on a quarterly basis. We did it in late September. We just did another round in the end of January. And we found that the CO2 levels, which is what is measured when they do the air quality testings to ensure that there's an appropriate exchange of air, are well below the threshold that the CDC recommends for CO2 levels in occupied classrooms. So the threshold, and again, these are numbers for COVID era, is about 1,100 parts per million of carbon dioxide. The median of our district was about 600 parts per million. So to kind of give you perspective, not to be a complete geek here and geek out on numbers, but if you're outside at any point in time, the carbon dioxide level is roughly 400 parts per million. So this indicates that we're really getting a proper level of fresh air being distributed. And, again, the CDC guidelines, and they're very explicit in this in the latest round, is it should be about 15 to 20 cubic feet per minute per person being distributed in classrooms. We're doing well above that between using the strategy of the air purifiers, the resetting of our HVAC system, so the blowers in each classroom are running more consistently, and then also the windows being open as well. So something that's new in the CDC guidance that we didn't have before, and again, this is something that the Commonwealth has been using since the summer, is kind of a color coding system. Unfortunately, a little bit different in its scheme, other than red being bad, but a measure of the transmission rates of a community based upon the number of new cases per 100,000 in the last 7 days, and then also the percent positivity of tests. So again, good news for our two communities. If you were to apply the framework of this, Upton would be in the lowest, in the blue, and Mendon is in the moderate, is in the yellow. So furthermore, in the guidance document, its recommendation as far as an educational model based upon the community is, you can see in this chart, what are you going to do? Should you be hybrid? Should you be full in person, and so on? So again, looking at low blue and moderate yellow, the recommendation is K through 12 schools open for full in-person instruction, physical distancing of 6 feet or more to the greatest extent possible. So I can tell you very candidly, a lot of my colleagues were really kind of disappointed that why didn't the CDC back off the 6 foot piece if they are recommending full in-person instruction. As you probably would know, there's very, very few schools that if they were to stay adhered to 6 feet can actually fit all students in, again, a typical size classroom of around 850 square feet. I should note though, and it got cut off on the slide, but if you notice, there's a little footnote after greatest extent possible. You could see the footnote that says number 3. And that footnote says, if 6 foot is not achievable, then other strategies such as having consistent pods within a class, consistent pods within a team or a school should be implemented. So I think that is a very, very important caveat to note. So kind of interestingly, I do believe I shared this with all of you on the committee. I think we're starting to see more and more districts take a approach to this, a thoughtful approach of what can we do to get more kids back. And I share with you the story of, again, Hanover, a district, again, very, very similar to our size on the South Shore, that starting this Thursday are moving to a 3 to 4 distance apart for elementary students. And then they're phasing in their middle and high school students on March 8th with the intent to bring back all of the students that they've had in their hybrid program. They are tying it as well to a pool testing program for another, again, layer of security, but also sense of assurance by parents and also staff members. They had done some extensive surveying of parents as far as trying to get them to understand, to get a grip on who would be driving, who would be taking the bus. But in the interim of their planning, that has become a moot point because of the transportation guidance. So I want all of you to know that we are very, very cognizant, myself and the leadership team, our district leadership team, of what other districts are doing and what the planning. I can share with you in a recent survey, which again is being updated as we speak, most districts were in the same place that we were as far as adhering to a 6 foot physical distancing between our students and between desks. And I share with you that only 6 of the 84 districts that were in this part of the superintendent survey were in that 3 to 4 foot distance range. And I listed them for you. And you can see, I believe 4 of them are Voc Tech schools, and 2 of them, Methuen and Needham, are at the elementary level only. I do want to stress in all cases, and we're seeing this on a national level, we see our own data, we see this across the state, that in-school transmission is consistently low. I can't stress that enough, and I can't stress that the data is very, very clear that our mitigation strategies do work. The data is very, very clear. The overwhelming majority of our issues, be it new cases or quarantining that results of cases, happen because of things that are happening outside of the schools. We're also in constant contact, I know personally, on a daily basis. I am talking to our neighboring superintendents. Our districts are in different places, but I can tell you, Grafton, I've had a series of lengthy conversations with Jay Cummings, who's my colleague, who's the superintendent. they, the week before February vacation, went to all of their kindergartners being back, kindergarten and first grade being back. They have a memorandum of agreement with their association of 3 to 6 feet of distancing, trying to be as far apart as possible, but also having some flexibility there. Bellingham is in the process of later this week implementing a 3-2-3 model, which specifically speaks to going with in-person instruction on Wednesday, no more full remote on Wednesday, and alternating it between cohort 1 and cohort 2 during those 2 weeks. In the situation, and I've had some parents mention Medway, Blackstone Millville, and Holliston. Those, to a certain degree, are either K through 3 or K through, I believe Holliston might even be K through 5, are back. But in each of those cases, they have been able to implement that for the simple reason of having sufficient space in their schools, and also hiring additional staff to keep class sizes in that ballpark of 12 to 14. So with all this data,
Joe?
Yeah, absolutely.
Going back to that last page. So if you look at those schools collectively, do we know what the in-school transmission rate has been over the last 2 or 3 months? Comparing like the 3 to 4 foot distance across those schools, or any of the other?
You could individually go to, and I've been to the Holliston COVID dashboard. They aren't reporting the in-school transmission numbers. Okay. But we could easily access that information. I could get that information. I would be willing to bet that it is comparable data to ours, Phil, as far as very, very low percentage.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
But Joe, do we have any definitive data yet for the difference between the 6 foot and the 3 foot social distancing? Like, are there enough school districts doing a 3 foot so that we can do a comparison?
The only data, and if you look at that first bullet point, Carrie, is of the 6 communities or 6 districts that I've listed up there. And again, it is sometimes an apples to oranges comparison, but I think you could easily do an extrapolation. Needham, off the top of my head, is probably at least 5,000 to 7,000 students. So, we're easily less than half of their population. But, I think virtually all of these districts have, in some way, shape, or form, created their own COVID-19 dashboard to track their data. So it could be easily done.
There's also examples. I mean, we're pulling from public schools here, right? There's private school examples as well.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that data is available.
The issue with the private schools is they're not exactly public with their data. I mean, you could always, Sean, make a phone call and, try to find out, but I don't know whether that data would be forthcoming.
Right.
So taking all this into account, where we are right now, these, in my opinion, are our next steps. And I would love, to get your viewpoints of what we need to do. And I've got some strong ideas of the direction we need to go as a district. What I'm doing is, if you recall, we had a very, very large reentry committee. I think there was approximately 80 people. I'm reconvening that steering committee to meet this Thursday evening at 7 p.m. To kind of talk about where we are and think about tangibly what are the next steps. I think we need to continue to look at the data. Again, I think the community and district data is wonderful. We've got 2 weeks worth of some really, really positive trends. My gut tells me there is a light at the end of the tunnel. My gut tells me that it will continue to improve, but, am I an infectious disease specialist? By no means. You hear the concerns around, potential another wave around variants and so on. But I feel like at this point, given the trends, we need to aggressively plan for bringing back more kids. And as we've always talked about, we really need to focus on early elementary, in addition to first grade, bringing back our kindergartners, bringing back our second graders, and doing this in a smart, safe, and incremental fashion. Again, looking at just what exactly you talked about, and I'd be more than happy, I will have this data for the reconvening of that reentry committee Thursday night. But looking at that data and extrapolating it from the districts where the 6 feet of distancing has been lessened. And then also, again, today was day one. Let's take a look at what's worked well, what's been a challenge with all of our first graders being back. I think we also, some of the concerns that come up, and I think these are very legitimate concerns, is if we start bringing back more and more cohorts, what are some of the logistical challenges that we have to conquer? And believe it or not, the biggest one is lunch. We now have a situation where with the hybrid model, we have our kids back in the cafeterias. They're pretty much 2 per bench. There's at least 6 feet between the 2 of them. And obviously the big concern is obviously during lunchtime, they are not masked. So if we bring back more and more kids, what are some of the creative solutions? And I'm sure there are creative solutions to work that out effectively. Another piece too, and again, I think this is a smart, this is guidance that we hold true to with regard to contact tracing, not only from CDC, but also from the Massachusetts DPH, is in making determination about close contacts, we do use that, that whole piece around 6 feet of distancing. So figuring out if we bring back more kids at 3 or 4 feet, what are the implications for contact tracing? And then I think we have to develop, again, some real specific concrete plans for bringing back more kids, and maybe 3-2-3 is an element of it, but bringing back more cohorts, particularly starting with our youngest learners, for more in-person learning. And I do think we really have to look at the strategic pool testing. I know I'm kind of going against what I said 2 weeks ago, but if that strategic pool testing brings another layer of assurance to our families, to our staff, I think it's something that's worth investigating. And perhaps we start with something like the high school, in kind of knowing that we, do not have asymptomatic COVID positive students or staff within our schools. So I think those are the pieces that we need to move on sooner rather than later. So those are my thoughts right now, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have about all of that.
Well, I just want to start by saying thank you very much for the analysis. It's very comprehensive and it has a lot of data from the other school districts across the state. So it gives us a very good perspective, Joe. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And I just want to say I agree. And that was one of my comments. I feel like that, I know the CDC guidelines said testing's not required, but I think if we're, it may be advisable if we're talking about relaxing the 6 feet distancing, which, they are still adhering to. And, I understand like most of the studies that we're seeing are showing, little to no in-school transmission, but those are all based on the 6 foot distancing. So I think really like having some more information about what that looks like at 3 feet is going to be important. But I did have a question in terms of, I know you said you're going to be sending out some surveys, but so I'm just trying to get a sense for parents who may not be comfortable with less than 6 foot distance, if that's what we get to. We've asked for a semester long commitment. So in terms of hybrid versus remote. So if somebody who is hybrid and which would then become in person is not comfortable with that, what's their avenue to switching to full remote? Are we going to be able to accommodate them? So that's certainly one thing that I would want to look at.
That's a great question, Vicki. I think what we'll be looking to put out tomorrow is what I would refer to as a quick hitter. 5-6 questions, yes, no, to kind of get a sense of percentage, okay? I want to get a sense of what percentage of our elementary students, what percentage of our middle school parents, of our high school parents would answer to, hey, if we're going to go from the hybrid to full in person, is that something that are you comfortable with that for your child? Are you comfortable with the distancing going from 6 feet to 3 or 4 feet, or 3 to 6 feet, and so on? So we can get a sense if the numbers come back that it's like, okay, 85% of our parents want this, then we plan accordingly. And I think part of that planning accordingly, just like Hanover did over a period of 2 or 3 weeks, is to say, okay, if we're going to go back full in person for this specific grade, if your child is in the hybrid and you're not comfortable with that, then you'll have to commit to full remote. We can't have full in person for a grade and then also have hybrid for the grade as well. That just won't work.
Yeah.
So I would envision that we kind of do this quick hit to kind of get a sense of generally where we are as a community. And then if the numbers bear it so, then we kind of go to the more detailed, like, hey, what's your name? Who's your child? What bus do they take? And so on, that other layer of survey.
And do you have a sense of what kind of timeline you're looking at? Like, what I know we're talking about developing a timeline, but like, what's the timeline for developing the timeline?
Great question. So I want to move within the next week to 2 weeks. I want to build upon, in a good world, the success of the first grade callback. And I think the high priority, strategic priority is K and 2 to join the first grade counterparts. Something that I did not include in my presentation, but I think it's something for consideration. And part of, again, if you watch the media reports and you watch the CDC and you watch this tremendous debate that's occurring nationally about the topic, and it is around vaccination. And I am, in a perfect world, I would like to see all of our teachers vaccinated as soon as possible. I don't know when that's going to happen. And if you think about the current timeline, say we were in a situation where the vaccinations begin on March 15th, okay? And then you kind of plan what's that period going to look like? What's it going to look like as far as 3-week span, maybe 4-week span in between the 2 injections, and then another 2 weeks after that second injection to work for at least the maximum immunity and so on. we could be looking at not a return until at least May. I want to move quicker than that. And I know I'm speaking for myself as the superintendent of this district. I know I'm speaking for many of my colleagues as well. Again, this is a super, super difficult, the most challenging situation of my career. And I think we have to have a balanced, moderated approach to this. I care first and foremost about what's happening with our students, their safety, their well-being, their learning. That's a huge concern, but also the safety and well-being of our staff. I think the good news, guys, and the data is starting to bear it, is the data is getting better. Okay, we're seeing the beginning of a positive trend. We're seeing the beginning of the proverbial light at the end of the tunnel. I think we have to be aggressive, and we have to move, and we have to aggressively plan to get more and more kids back. That's what we said at the beginning of this whole conversation. And have I handled everything 100% perfectly? Probably not. But I don't have any regrets based upon where this district was back in December and January for any of the moves and the decisions that we made. I think we made some very, very prudent moves in protecting the health, the safety, and the well-being of our staff and our kids. But I think we're starting to emerge from it. And I hope, I certainly pray that the positive trends do continue.
So what are, based on what you just said, so what are the teachers' thoughts these days, or the staff's thoughts? Not just the teachers, but everybody overall.
I think it's a mixed bag. I think, we have on Thursday our joint labor management committee, which will be meeting Thursday afternoon, as a matter of fact. I think that there is still some ambivalence, Phil. I think it varies from teacher to teacher. I think it varies from the elementary level to the middle level to the high school level. I think when you're talking about teachers and particularly of the younger kids, those early elementary, to say that you are going to stay within a 6-foot distance of all of your kids all day. I mean, you guys know, your parents, how do you socially distance with a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old? Okay. I think to their credit, they're remarkable, they're professional, they're nurturing, they do everything that they can so that they and their kids are safe. But I do think that there's fear, there's ambivalence. Again, I know firsthand of employees, staff members who've lost parents from this. And when it directly touches your life in that type of way, it's something that I don't take lightly. I don't take in a cavalier fashion. I don't think we're out of this crisis by any means. I think things are trending better. I think things will continue to trend better as we progress through the spring. So I'm probably being a little too verbose right now, Phil, but I do think it's a mixed bag.
Okay, well, let's get some of the plans in place and let's see where it goes. Be a good thing all around, I think. I think I think the kids need it collectively. So, and I think people want to do the best job and do it in the right way. So let's start getting to the details. Because that will also, I think, give people a little bit of a, to your point, a light at the end of the tunnel. Kind of when are we talking about, in terms of timing and some of the different factors. We've talked about the factors before in higher ways, but now we're getting down to where, transmissions dropped and things like that. And, vaccines are rolling out.
Sure.
always wish it to be quicker, but
I think we're going to see, as we progress through the spring and then the summer, more of the proverbial herd immunity. I think the reality of what we're seeing, this is just my own personal theory, but what are we up to now? 28, 29 million cases as a country. I think the reality is it's probably at least 3 times the amount of people have been infected with COVID. And now I think as of today, I saw 42 million vaccinations in place. I do think we're slowly going to hit a tipping point where, the herd immunity does come into play. That's your science lesson for the day, by the way.
Well, I agree with Phil. I think it's actually kind of exciting that we could see some school before the end of the year. So that's really good. So it's up to us to make sure the planning happens as quickly as we can possibly.
Yeah, and I believe I invited all of you to the steering committee meeting. I really think it's important, as a community, we really engage on this and we come up with tangible plans. And again, that timeline I think is extremely important.
I want to toss out here just as a voice of caution, because admittedly, I am somebody who lost somebody very close to me because of COVID. And I also believe that transmission rates at schools have been low, but I believe that they have been because we've taken appropriate cautions that are guided by science and by CDC recommendations. So I just want to make sure that as we move forward, and I don't want it to sound like I don't want to move forward, because I think that's the appropriate direction for us to go, but I want to make sure that we're doing it with all the appropriate counsel and data. Because I would hate for us to be caught in a situation where it was working for us because we were maintaining appropriate distance and because we were working with less students in a classroom. So the more data that we can gather from some of these other communities who've been working with less space, more students per classroom, lower students to ratios, would be really helpful, I think, in quelling some of those fears for the population who may be somewhat hesitant.
It's a great point.
Joe, do you have any sense at this point, like we've always talked about prioritizing the elementary grades for return. Beyond that, I saw like in Hanover, it was, the elementary grades this week and then all middle and high school next week. So do you envision like a phased in approach like that? And would it just be elementary then?
Yeah, phased in approach, prioritizing our elementary grades. And then, and again, I don't necessarily have the right answers, but I think the middle school is also prime for the simple reason, again, going back to those CDC, Jen and Paul have done a tremendous job in keeping a stable cohort of kids together. So again, bringing those kids back, I think, again, the logistical challenges of lunch, the logistical challenges of how you actually work, the schedule, how you work if there's the kids transitioning for specials and so on, to ensure that, if you've ever had the pleasure of being in the 8th grade hallway during passing time in regular non-COVID times, just how crazy it is. So I think there's considerable logistical challenges, but the middle school is also a priority. I know, the freshman year is super, super important. And then, I've gotten some very, very heartfelt messages from parents of seniors that they would like to see their seniors have something that, again, approaches some type of normalcy for their kids. So, in no way, shape, or form am I trying to be cavalier about, this class is more important than that class. But, our elementary students, where, again, they're the smallest. You look at the numbers as far as transmission, they're by far the lowest, and so on. they're the ones who need the in-person instruction the most. The high school kids, they're probably the ones that can function the most in a hybrid or function the most with remote learning. Not that I'm saying that it's ideal, but when you've got to make difficult decisions and you've got to prioritize, that's the mindset.
Understood. Any other questions from the committee? Look forward to talking more about that Thursday night. So next, we have a date change.
Yeah, so you have this in your background notes, and I think this is why, speaking of the high school, John and Marianne have approached me about changing the calendar. We typically, it's tradition, we always have in the calendar a Friday evening graduation. So I believe it is scheduled for Friday, June 4th this year. So they are looking, again, I think very wisely, to have a graduation ceremony very similar to the one that we did last July for the class of 2020, outdoors. I think it worked extremely well. So they're looking to change the date to Saturday, June 5th. It'll be at 10 a.m. In the event that there's inclement weather, it'll have a rain date of Sunday, same exact time. So seeing that this is a calendar issue, it needs a formal motion and a vote for approval.
Motion to move graduation date to June 5th.
Second.
Vote by roll call.
John Nicholson, aye.
Lee Martin, aye.
Bill Desutter, aye.
Carrie Lawrence, aye.
Dorothy Scally, aye.
Vicki Ludwigson, aye. The motion is approved and the date change will go forward. All right. Any correspondence?
We have none.
Other matters not anticipated by the committee within 48 hours of the posted meeting? Hearing none. Future agenda items, the open budget hearing on the fiscal year 22 budget on March 15th. Encourage everyone to attend. Do we know yet if we're doing that in person? Have we?
That's a great point. I am making a strong recommendation that we do that one live, and socially distanced auditorium per usual. I think the fact that Upton has managed effectively to do town meetings, socially distanced within the auditorium. Seeing that it's that important, I think we should do that live.
Okay. When do you expect that we would get an answer on that?
Now? It's my strong recommendation that we do it live, and I've actually scheduled it to be live.
Oh, no. Okay. Got it. I thought you were like waiting to hear back from somebody in the town.
We control that auditorium, so
yes, got it.
Okay.
But are we saying that there would actually be an audience as well allowed?
Yes, socially distanced audience.
How would we deal with overflow? Like if there were more people who wanted to attend, that we had, the capacity to distance?
Well, we could do it as a hybrid meeting where we also simultaneously live stream it and Zoom it.
Okay.
Just for a point of clarification, the last Upton meeting was actually not in the auditorium. It was in a tent in the parking lot. Kelly, you can probably outline that, but better than I can, but it was there. So, but I think if we do it in the auditorium, there's a way for us to do it. It's just going to have to Vicki's point, manage the audience level that we can actually have in the auditorium. So
we calculated for the annual town meeting last May that we could have close to 120 people in the auditorium socially distanced.
We can have people bid on tickets. It'll be a fundraiser. for this.
Gonna need a very long table for just us.
I think we can manage that. We'll make like a U or something. Yeah.
All right. So roll call to executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Exemption number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to negotiations with the Regional Teachers Association, because doing so in open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the committee. The committee will not return to open session.
Sean Nicholson, aye.
Lee Martin, aye.
Bill Desutter, aye.
Mary Lawrence, aye.
Dorothy Scally, aye.
Vicky Ludwigson, aye.